Who are we hearing that from? Oh.
There it is.
Mr. Mayor, it is 5:30 and the live stream and recording has commenced. You may begin your meeting.
Okay, thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk. Good afternoon, Council. I see we have quorum, so I call this regular council meeting of Monday, October 3rd into session. It's hard to believe, but this is our first council meeting since Her Majesty's death. So therefore, we have a statement I shall read, and then we will have a moment of silence in honor of Her Majesty. On September 8th, the town of Pelham joined others from across the Commonwealth and those around the world to mourn the loss of Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II. On behalf of Town of Pelham Council and the residents of Pelham, I offer again my deepest condolences to the royal family and the people of Great Britain and the entire Commonwealth. Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, who marked 7 decades on the throne this year, was the longest reigning monarch in British history. For most Canadians, we have known no other sovereign. She had vowed to devote her life to the service of the Commonwealth, and during that time, Her Majesty made over 20 official visits to Canada and traveled from coast to coast to coast. Her life was one filled with grace and courage. She has inspired so many across the globe and will continue to do so through her legacy. Please join me in honoring Her Majesty with a moment of silence. Okay, thank you, Council. And we now move on to our regular meeting. And at this time, we have a land acknowledgement statement. And tonight, it will be read by myself. We begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging and reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does bring us to the adoption of the agenda. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that the agenda for the October 3rd, 2022 regular meeting of Council be adopted as circulated. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk. Any discussion on the agenda as presented? Not seen any, Madam Deputy Clerk.
Thank you. For the vote, I will begin with Councillor Hahn. Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Hildebrandt?
Yes.
Councillor Kaur?
Yes.
Councillor Olson?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. Through Mr. Mayor, we are now on item number 3, being disclosure of pecuniary interests.
Okay, thank you. After viewing the agenda, does any councillor have a pecuniary interest or general nature thereof to declare? And I see Councillor Kaur.
Yes, Your Honor. I just want to be transparent. I'm a businessman who uses one of the papers that we're going to be discussing in 10.2.2. I did reach out to the Integrity Commissioner for some advice, and he about this issue, and he assured me that I could participate in this debate and also vote on this issue without breaking any code of conduct regulations.
Okay, thank you for that disclosure, Councillor Kaur. Any other pecuniary interest or nature thereof to declare? Not seeing any. Madam Deputy Clerk?
Thank you. I have noted this. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that brings us to item number 5, being adoption of minutes. You may call for any errors or omissions.
Okay, thank you. Does any councillor have any omissions or additions to these minutes? Not seeing any. Madam Deputy Clerk?
Thank you. Therefore, I have a motion put forth by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Wink. Be it resolved that the following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated, and read. 1. C15-2022, regular meeting of council, September 6, 2022. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Any further discussion? Not seeing any, Madam Deputy Clerk?
Thank you for the vote. I will begin with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we are now on item number 7 of the agenda. As council is aware, councilors may request to lift an item of the consent agenda if they wish to amend the resolution presented. If councilors simply wish to comment on an item, they are not required to lift an item. Therefore, members of council, if there are any items to be lifted, please do advise.
Okay, thank you. Does any councillor wish to lift any of these agenda consent items? Not seeing any. Madam Deputy Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to the consent agenda, being item number 8. If any members of council wish to speak on a topic on the consent agenda, now would be the time.
Okay, thank you. Any members of council have any items they would like to speak to? And I see first off, Councillor Olson.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to address the Greenbelt Foundation application because I think this looks to me to be an excellent example of the type of project that we should be undertaking because nature is our ally in so many things, and this puts nature on our balance sheet, and this leads to eventually being able to control all of our natural assets. And I said nature is our ally, and nature is basically 50% cheaper and longer lasting than any of the gray infrastructure that we're building. So this will help us identify the cost of creating green infrastructure, and it'll also hopefully tell us what the cost of not creating green infrastructure will be.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. And perhaps before I go to any other councillors, perhaps Ms. Quinlan, any comments on the grant itself?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pass it to the Director of Community and Planning. This is more of her area of expertise.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Councillor indicated, this is a grant application for doing a natural heritage asset management plan for the town. The grant application is through the Greenbelt Foundation, and certainly within the areas of the Greenbelt plan, there are a number of natural heritage assets that can be accounted for and a value attributed to them in terms of accounting value, which will then give us an indication of their not only physical importance, but also their financial importance to us, as well as we would be evaluating them in terms of being able to provide infrastructural services and community benefits, and such as stormwater management, flood control, and recreational opportunities. So the Natural Heritage Asset Management Plan would identify these natural assets, attribute a value to them, and then identify means or mechanisms to manage those assets going forward, so that they become part of our asset management plan, similar to our infrastructure asset management plan. So that is the intent of this program. The grant application is seeking funding for $100,000 from the Greenbelt Foundation. And the application was due in mid-September. We submitted the application, and so we hope to find out in early December whether or not it will be successful. If it is, then it will move into the budget discussions for next year, because there will be a portion that will still require municipal funding as well.
Excellent. Thank you for those, for that update. I'll now go back to councilors. Any councilor wish to comment on the Greenbelt Foundation's funding? Not seeing any other hands. Back to you, Madam Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thereby have a motion put forth by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that the consent agenda items as listed on the October 3rd, 2022 council agenda be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved. If there are no further comments, Mr. Mayor, I will proceed to the vote.
Oh, wait, I see a couple of hands. Councillor Wink.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the treasurer, a few questions with respect to the financial report.
Okay, and that would be 8.3.2 then, correct?
8.3.2.
Okay,
yes.
go ahead, Councillor.
So the building department revenues were well ahead of annual budget, and this is to the end of June. Perhaps I should have addressed this particular piece to the Director of Community Planning. Are the building permits issued slowing down over the last couple of months with the rise of interest rates? Have you noticed any trend?
That's to the Director of Planning, Ms. Weens.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, through you, what I can advise is one of the reasons why the building permit fees were so high is we issued the permit for the 132 unit seniors retirement home, and that was a large fee. In terms of building permits starting to slow down, at this point in time, we are still keeping pace. However, I think the last 2 weeks in September, we did see that there seemed to have been fewer permits coming in. So certainly the summer months were still, kind of kept pace with what our expectations were. And as we go into the fall and winter, there typically is a bit of a slowdown in permits. Usually in December, we see a little bit of an uptake in permits because people will also want to get permits in before fees go up January 1st.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I have a couple of more?
Well, let's, we'll go, I'll let you have one more, and then we'll go back to council again. Okay, Councillor?
Yep, that's fine. So
Okay.
this one definitely will be to the treasurer. Can you comment on the repairs and maintenance of gym bleachers and roof maintenance? What were the nature of the roof repairs on a 5-year-old building?
Director of Finance, Ms. Quinlan Murphy.
Well, actually, the specifics of the MCC roof, I will hand that off to Vicky because she's responsible for that facility. So I don't know, Vicky, if you can make some comments on the roof repairs.
Okay, Ms. Van Ravensbrae, Director of Wellness and Recreation.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. We did have roof repairs that were required to be fixed, and the contractor came in. They had to wait until a certain time. They came in and they repaired the roof leaks.
So is this covered under our warranty, or is this now outside of warranty?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, these particular repairs were not covered under warranty. We tried that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Wink. Go to Councilor Hildebrand now.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to deal with financials as well. First, I'd like to start off with the MCC Financials, and I'd like to comment up on the electricity usage. The 6-month usage was only 40% of the budget. That's an amazing statistic because the staff at the MCC have done an amazing job. On November the 7th, I'm going to be bringing a Utility Sustainability Committee report and showing you the basics of how these kind of results have been attained by a staff that's working diligently to save money. The other comment I'd like to make on utilities is the fact I'm not sure everyone's kept pace with the cost of natural gas. Natural gas in 2021, January, was 10.38 cents per cubic meter. In January of this year, it was 14.56 per cubic meter. In May, it was 17.75. In July, it was 26.93 per cubic meter. November, it's going to go up again because Enbridge Gas has asked for another increase. So when the budgets are prepared for this coming year and going forward, our natural gas cost budgets are going to be something to be looked at very closely because obviously it's going to be very difficult to come anywhere close to any of the budgets we've had in the past on natural gas. That's my comment with regards to the MCC electrical. I have other comments on 8.3.4 temporary road access to Line Avenue and 8.3.6 LED streetlights.
Okay, we'll go ahead with the 8.3.4, please.
Okay, temporary access. I'd like to address the, through you, Mr. Mayor, the Public Works Director. You're calling for temporary access across Line Avenue, and I want to just ask you to explain what this involves, because I believe the Steve Bauer Trail crosses in that area, however, the Steve Bauer Trail in that area, I think, is technically defined as being in Pelham, although when I canvassed last time, those are the homes I believe I canvassed, according to the list I got from the town. Can you explain exactly what is happening in that area so everyone understands perfectly what's happening?
Yes.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So the trail in that location is actually owned by the city of Wellington. So this access road, proposed access road, would be south of the Pelham-Welland boundary. The actual town line runs basically along the backside of the east curb line for Line Avenue. So the trail is, and the ditch is owned and operated by the town of, or the city of Welland in that particular location. What the request is, if you're familiar with discussions regarding Quaker Road reconstruction as part of that large regional sewer main that's going in, that project, the region is going to be completing the replacement of the sanitary sewer from Pelham all the way to Rice Road. And when they come across that subdivision, there's only one access and egress point on Montgomery. Because of the depth of the sewer, they're not going to be able to maintain vehicular access for a period of time. I'm not sure what that timeline is yet. It'll be brief while they pass through that subdivision, but there will be definitely a period of time where vehicle access, both for residents and emergency access, will not be available via Montgomery. So the request is to make a temporary connection to Line Avenue where it crosses that trail to allow access for the residents of that subdivision, as well as emergency access to that subdivision during that construction period.
Okay. Councilor Hildebrand?
Thank you. Thank you. That covers that subject.
Okay, thank you. So let me go back to council then. Any other councilors with any other comments on agenda items? And I see Councilor Stewart.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. My concern is, I just lost it now. The 8.3.5, I guess Ms. Weens would have the answer to this. It sounds to me that there'll be some extra pressure on the planning department. And my concern is that it says there is no stop the clock in this. So I'm concerned that the developers could possibly delay submitting documents or discussions to effectively run out the clock to save themselves fees. Is that a concern?
To the Director of Planning, Ms. Weens.
So, Mr. Mayor, through you, what it means is when we have a complete application, which means that when they have provided us with the information that's been identified and the pre-consultation meeting is needed to support an application. And when we have all of that, then we start the process in terms of reviewing and receiving a development application. And that's when the time frames kick in, and they're very tight turnarounds, as you can see from the report. What it means is, though, after we've provided comments to an applicant and they have to make revisions to their plans, there's no ability to stop the clock and allow them to do that. And that often is one of the reasons why there can be some delay in processing an application, because consultants, again, are very busy as well. And their ability to respond and make adjustments to plans is constrained as well. So it's that stop the clock mechanism that is no longer available. And so if council does not make a decision within the specified time frame, then we are obligated to refund fees. And this will start in January 1st.
Back to you, Councillor. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. But so part of my question was, could they use that to their advantage to delay things at all, so that we do have to make some refunds?
Mr. Mayor, through you, I don't know if it would be to their advantage. But what it would be is, the pressure is certainly on to put reports to council within that time frame, and the reports may recommend a refusal because we haven't received the information versus recommending approval. So it's difficult to know whether or not that will be used to their advantage, but it would mean that we would if we didn't make a decision, whether it's a refusal or approval, we would then have to refund the fees or portion of the fees.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other council? We still have lots of debates here, I believe, on consent agendas. Before I go to Councillor Olson, I know Councillor Hahn and Councillor Kaur, you have yet to comment, and perhaps you won't. If neither of you have any comments on consent agendas, then I will go to Councillor Olson. Councillor Olson, you're up.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. My question is for the treasurer, and it's to do with the fixed asset or the capital projects portion of your report. And I'm turning to the section on page 2 marked fleet. And it says no bids looking for availability for the first 2 vehicles on the list. Are we still experiencing those kind of difficulties and delays with the supply chain?
Go to the Director of Finance, Ms. Murphy Quinlan.
Yes, we are. And we actually have the Manager of Public Works here, Ryan, who is directly involved in those purchases. So I'll hand it off to Ryan.
Okay. Mr. Ryan Cook, please.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, there we are continuing to have problems procuring these 2 vehicles. We did put them out recently for a bid, where we received no bids from any dealer that I have any confidence that we could actually receive these vehicles. Pricing hasn't come out for 2023. Hoping that it comes out in mid-October, and we'll re-tender these vehicles again.
Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Cook. And then for the treasurer, I'm sure this is the question for her. Let me just find it on my sheet here. I'm looking at roads, which is some pages back, and road reconstruction, Pelham Street, College Street, and Port Robinson Road. There's a notation that said the work is completed and invoices are outstanding. I would have thought that there would have been something under committed on that report.
Which project number are you looking at? It says RD.
That's RD 03-20. It's right at the bottom of the page, and that's it's page 5, or appendix 5, and I can't tell what the page number is.
Yeah,
That's
no,
under-
I see it there. This is the carry forward. So we have the 96,229 carry forward, and I think this was just the I think the maintenance that's left. This is the phase 1 of Pelham Street.
Yeah.
So once the maintenance period is over, we can release those funds.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Olson. Any other member of council have any other consent agenda they want to comment on? Councilor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the Director of Public Works has to do with the LED streetlights. We have many different streetlights in the town. I know you're starting with replacing the Cobra heads, which are the standard fixtures, and they are the majority of the fixtures in town. When we come to replacing the non-standard LED fixtures, are they going to be replaced with standard LED fixtures for those lights? And the second question is, can the light intensity of the lights being installed be adjusted?
To your Director of Public Works, Mr. Moore.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the first part of the question is, we are going to be standardizing our decorative lights. So when we do the conversion from our standard decorative light fixture to an LED fixture, we will be standardizing those, and we're working with our consultant to come up with cost-effective and aesthetically pleasing options for that. But definitely we will be looking to go with one type of manufacturer for the different lights. As part of the replacement program, we're also trying to match up those manufacturers with whatever options they have to best replicate what's already in place. So that's happening. We're not trying to change the complete look of the decorative light fixtures, but we are definitely standardizing it with one manufacturer, but still trying to replicate what the existing look is. So that's the answer to the first question. The second, with respect to the ability to dim, when our consultant did their analysis and study, they also look at the road lighting and compare that to standards, current lighting standards and design standards. So we don't have the capabilities of actually dimming the lights with this phase. If there are areas where people are being negatively impacted by the light coming from the LED lights, there are shields that we can put on to try to direct the light directly onto the road, and they do that when they do the design anyway. One of the features that staff will be looking at bringing to council as part of a future budget would be to implement smart technology on those lights, on those light fixtures, which will give us different options and abilities to dim lights in certain areas of town at certain times. So that's something that would be coming as a future budget consideration for council. It's not part of this this phase of the work or scope of the work.
Thank you. Excellent work.
Councillor, while we're with you, any other comments on any of the remaining consent agendas?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any other councillor have any comments on consent agenda items? And I see Councillor Olson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to, I guess it's to Ms. Van Ravensway and perhaps the clerks, with respect to the Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee. I'm wondering, what is the established method for communicating with caregivers perhaps, or other people, to the plans for accessibility? Because often the people that have the accessibility issues have a support person who also has accessibility issues. And I'm just wondering what approach they're being taken there, because I know the clerks go out of their way to create inclusion and communication. I just wondered what measures they've taken.
I will.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. If
Oh,
I can
there we go.
ahead. Thank you. As Councillor indicated, the Clerk's Department is responsible for the oversight of JAC, which is our Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee. So that committee is what puts together this accessible plan. The Clerk's Department do ensure that that plan does get put and posted on the town's website, and we certainly share it with other advisory committees. So there are other members from advisory committees that are as well part of that committee or are aware of what's going on with that committee. And certainly whenever we do receive any calls from residents, we're able to direct them to the committee or to ensure that they have accessibility to whatever services they need, including documents.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Back to you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make sure if there was technology available to communicate the plan to people so they take full advantage of it. And I'm thinking of people with sight problems and perhaps hearing problems, how we go out of our way to make sure that we get the information out to them.
We do ensure, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for the question. We do ensure that if somebody does contact us, whichever method that they need that communication given to them is how we will provide it. So certainly if somebody needs something, perhaps in Braille, we'll make sure that we're able to get something done and provided to that resident.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure that'll work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. One last call. Any other debate, discussion on any of the consent agenda items? Not seeing any. Madam Deputy Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will just repeat the resolution for clarity. Be it resolved that the consent agenda items as listed on the October 3rd, 2022 council agenda be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved. Mr. Mayor, if there are no further comments, I will begin the vote.
Okay, I believe we can do the vote.
Excellent, thank you. I'll begin with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Olson?
Yes?
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you very much, and that carries. Three, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to item number 10, presentation and consideration of reports. Our first report this evening is 10.2.1, electronic monitoring of employees policy. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrandt, seconded by Councillor Stewart. Be it resolved that Council receive report 2022-0206, electronic monitoring policy for information, and that Council approve the electronic monitoring policy. To Mr. Mayor for discussion.
Thank you. Perhaps before I turn to council, perhaps the CAO, Mr. Cribbs, would have a few words on this.
Good evening, Council. This matter is on the agenda because there's a statutory imperative to have it a policy in place by the middle of the month, and this is the last meeting prior to that date. So new provincial regulation.
I'm sorry, Mr. CAO, you are frozen.
Perhaps we'll just allow him one moment.
Sorry, council, we have a technical difficulty. The clerk is working on it. Thank you. Oh, there you are.
That was a brilliant answer, Nola. Did you get anything after good evening, Council?
No, that's where we left you. Yes.
Oh, okay. Well then, good evening, Council. This document is before you this evening because of a provincial statutory requirement. We're now, any place of employment with more than 25 staff is obligated to have a policy of this nature, wherein you identify if or when or how you conduct electronic monitoring or technological monitoring of staff in the workplace. So this document is before you to satisfy that requirement, and it does indeed set forth when, where, and how the town does monitor its own operations. Subject to questions, that is its purpose, and we endorse it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. CAO. Any questions on the report from any councillor? Councillor Hahn.
Yes, through the mayor to the CAO. So will you be sending out, depending on how this, of course, vote goes, will you be sending out a notice to all town employees as to the path forward?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Olson, did you have a hand? No, you didn't. Okay, sorry. Okay, those are all the questions, Madam Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the vote, we will begin with Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to item 10.2.2, bringing the proposed bylaw to regulate the delivery of flyers, newspapers, and unsolicited print materials. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Stewart. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2022-0227, proposed bylaw to regulate the delivery of flyers, newspapers, and unsolicited print materials for information, and that Council approve in principle the proposed distribution of flyers, newspapers, and unsolicited print materials bylaw as presented, and that Council direct the proposed bylaw be presented to Council for consideration at the next regular meeting of Council. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk. Councillor Wink, this is your motion. Perhaps you would like to speak on it?
Sorry about that. Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just as a little bit of FYI for the rest of the council, Thorold has bylaws similar to this. I know it's been cited in the Welland Tribune that Welland Council is looking at this. So there are similar issues. The mayor and I sat down with Niagara this week, early in the summer, discussing options on what we could do to eliminate the throwing of newspapers in driveways, and sometimes they don't even make the driveway. I guess now that this is drafted, I would prefer that we go back to Niagara, the staff go back to Niagara this week and discuss the issue a little bit further and come up with solutions that will satisfy both parties. I think we had some good suggestions before, and I think now that we've gone this far, I think it's appropriate that we communicate appropriately with Niagara this week.
So, Councillor Wink, I take it you wish to defer a vote on this at this time?
I would like to move this back to staff to have appropriate communication with Niagara this week on this issue.
Okay, thank you. Madam Deputy Clerk, the next step.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I understand that I believe there's more discussion.
Oh, okay, Councillor Kaur?
I fully agree with Councillor Wink, but would you not want to have business people participate in it? Because they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars advertising through this means, and I think they should have a say in it too.
Councilor Wink, any comments on that, or just?
Yeah, so Niagara this week distributes this on behalf of Business Depot. I think it goes hand in hand. So, yeah, if you want to add Business Depot to this, that's fine. But I think there's got to be some discussion here and help correct the problem to the satisfaction of everyone.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Wink. Back to you, Councilor Corr.
Yes, and maybe I didn't make myself clear. I'm thinking about the businesses like the Shoppers Drug Mart, Giant Tiger, Food Basics. These people pay a lot of property taxes, and they also pay a lot to advertise. And this is the lifeblood of their businesses. And I think they should have a say in what's going on and maybe have some input. You might be surprised what they might offer.
So I understand the issue of having the advertising being delivered. It's not so much it being delivered, it's how it's being delivered, which is being done through Niagara this week. So just to throw the papers all over the place is not appropriate. There are ways that they can deliver. They have the right to deliver them right to our doorstep. There are other means that they can get this information out. We're not trying to affect the businesses. We're not trying to negatively impact anyone. What we're trying to do is come up with a suitable solution to deliver these papers.
Thank you. Any other comments, Councilor Corr?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before I go to any other councilors, I would like to just comment on the meeting that Councilor Wink and myself had with Niagara this week, some months ago. I fully expected them to come into the meeting loaded for bear, telling us, no, there's no way we can do business with any kind of restrictions on the placement of the paper or any rules we may come up with. But I must say they came into the meeting very open-minded. They knew exactly where Councilor Wink was coming from, and they were open for suggestions. So I was really taken aback by their willingness to sit down and talk about this. So I can see that now that we have these options formulated. I also agree with Councilor Wink that perhaps we now should include them and see just what works best for them so that they can continue to bring the paper to those who desire it in the best way that they can handle the situation. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Back to Council and Councilor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Similar to my comments I made the first time this motion was brought up, I've only had one complaint over the last 4 years on this issue. There are many more papers that are thrown into driveways in my area than just this one from the papers you're talking about. The Financial Post, the Globe, and the Tribune are all thrown into driveways in my area. That is not addressed. As I stated before, there's 16 local businesses that rely on the present distribution system. The change will affect not only the businesses, but our residents and their employees who are working our area. This is a serious change, and I appreciate the fact that we're going back to take another look at it, because obviously I would not be approving the motion as it's written, because I would truly believe that there's a problem here for me with transparency and credibility when we're limiting how the papers are distributed and how many papers can deliver to our door. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Stewart, I believe I saw your hand.
Yes, you did. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I think the simplest solution to this is partially written right in the proposal. I think the simplest thing would be for people who do not want to have the paper, which seems to really be very few. As Councillor Hildebrandt said, he's only had one complaint in 4 years. The simplest solution would be for anyone who doesn't want a paper to put a small sign at the end of their driveway or near to wherever the paper gets tossed. And they're not just thrown randomly and all over the place. Certainly things, it's like, a pitcher throws a ball. It doesn't always cross home plate. There are exceptions. The simplest thing would be for the people who do not want the paper to put a small sign right where the paper normally gets thrown, saying that they don't want the paper will not be delivered. And then the people who do want it have the 72 hours worth of time in order to pick those papers up. It would be a lot simpler. And as Councillor Hildebrandt says, it wouldn't be putting a severe handicap on these other papers who do their deliveries that way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those comments, Councillor. Any other comments from any councillor? Councillor Hahn.
Yes, through the mayor, just a question with regards to our town facilities. Do we have this paper available in our town facilities? I know we have the other. Is this one also available? Because that could also allow another means of distribution in our MCC, old town hall, current town hall, etc. Is that also available there at this time?
Who can we turn to? Mr. CAO, would you know that?
I can say that Niagara this week is not made available at Town Hall, and I can't speak for the MCC. Then turn that over to Ms. Van Ravensway, but not at Town Hall at any rate.
Okay. Ms. Van Ravensway, any newspapers allowed at the MCC?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Niagara This Week at the moment is not in the MCC, but if they are willing to drop them off, we would make them available. No different than the Voice of Pelham. We receive a number of copies of the Voice of Pelham weekly, and we make them available.
No. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Hahn?
Yes, further to that, I think it's only fair, first of all, that if we have one, we should have the other available in our town facilities. So that can be part of a discussion going forward, I think, with Niagara This Week to help in distribution. If people are out and about, they can pick them up and they know where they can get them, and certainly they can do that. I'm glad to see that we're not going to make this decision in haste, and I think it's a good idea that Councillor Wink suggests, and that's go back and have further discussion. Similar to Councillor Hildebrand, I can say I've had 2 complaints in 4 years with regards to the paper being dropped off, and it's usually when it's been raining, and so people aren't very happy that the water went inside the bag that the newspaper's in, and then the newspapers can't be read now. So often that's what it is. But nonetheless, I think that that's a good idea. And I also would agree with Councillor Kaur in that I think there should be some discussion as well with some of the main advertisers in the paper. They're spending an awful lot of money. I think that they probably want to have some discussion as well. So bringing in some key folks into a meeting seems like a good way to go. That way we get some different, we'll have some different perspectives from a number of different people that are in fact paying for this advertising.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments on this article in the agenda? If not, to the Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If council is looking for a motion to refer the matter back to staff and advertisers, I would require a mover and a second.
Okay, Councillor Kaur, you moving? And Councillor Wink, will you second it? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have drafted, be it resolved that the matter be referred back to staff and advertisers for further investigation on potential solutions other than a bylaw. Mr. Mayor, if there's no further discussion, I will move to a vote.
Well, Councillor, you've heard the resolution, the motion. Any other discussion on this item? Not seeing any, Madam Deputy Clerk.
Oh, I believe Councillor Hahn has.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Hahn.
For the mayor, would we not want to include, though, that we could also include some other stakeholders as well as perhaps also include in our existing town facilities?
To the Deputy Clerk.
Yes.
Your worship,
Oh.
perhaps I can,
Okay, Mr. CAO, Mr. Cribbs?
if the motion is to pass, what will happen is that my office will initiate some contact with the Pelham Wellington Chamber of Commerce. It's the only functioning business association we have, which represents Pelham area businesses, and attempt and request that they play a role in any discussions we have with the newspapers in the area, and that my office will serve to coordinate that function, and we'll see what transpires from that. We will report back to you in due course.
Okay, thank you. To the deputy clerk?
Thank you. I would just ask if that satisfies Councillor Han.
Council Han, does that satisfy your idea?
That's fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you. To the vote then, Madame.
Thank you. For the vote, I will begin with Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Han.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Duncan.
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to item number 10.2.3, options to ensure public safety at River Estate Park. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Han, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2022-0230 for information, and that Council direct staff to include option blank as capital budget project in 2023, being A, option 1, providing a permanent fence around the portion of the pond that borders the park; B, option 2, providing a permanent fence around the entire pond; C, option 3, increasing the plantings around the pond and letting it mature before removing the temporary snow fence; and option 4, allowing the existing vegetation to mature and increase the naturalized buffer area before removing the temporary snow fence. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. Discussion, Councillor Wink, I see your hand.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Cook, I guess. The option 4, how long would you estimate it would take for the existing vegetation to mature and increase before we remove the fence?
Mr. Cook?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it really doesn't take very long for the naturalized area to take over as soon as we stop mowing. So I would probably consider this time next year or earlier.
Councillor?
So in other words, we would be able to, within a year, remove the temporary fence, or if that's council's decision, and not cost us any additional money. Is that correct?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, that'd be correct. I would assume that it's about it would take a growing season, and really that's about it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have a multitude of comments. First of all, I'd like to say this is a very important issue. While I appreciate the report, it only deals with one of 22 ponds. As I previously stated, there are only 5 of the 22 ponds that are presently fenced. Even though this has to be addressed, we've done it by a temporary fence, I think it's a short-term solution at this point. And even the options provided need to be more fulsomely detailed. The issue is, number one, we've got an engineering standard which says that all wet ponds should be fenced, other than as approved by the Public Works Director. I believe that in my background, we always went by the engineering standards. So I believe something has to be done. I think it's critical that our strategic plan address stormwater ponds in general, because I believe that needs to be addressed. All of the recent stormwater ponds are classified as wet ponds, when in fact they are not. More of the ponds are marshes at best, with bulrushes growing in the bottom than being wet ponds. That River Estate definitely is a wet pond because there is water in the pond. But it seems as though given enough time, all the ponds just convert over to be a little marsh in the center. So essentially, if you put a full fence all the way around the pond, in a few years, you won't need a fence. It seems, when you look at Daimler Woods, which has a complete fence around it, which was a wet pond at one time, it essentially is now so vegetated, it's just a marsh, in my view. That's my opinion. Safety obviously is an issue. As I mentioned earlier, I prefer reanalysis essentially of the philosophy of wet ponds, as it seems like over time sediment and vegetation growth takes over the wet pond, and it becomes, I'm not sure what kind of definition of a pond. The options given are a quick reaction to an important issue that, in my view, need to become part of the 2023 Major Action Strategic Plan. So as a temporary measure, I believe the fence that we provided is a short-term solution, but we need a more fulsome report rather than just picking one at this time. So that concludes my comments, other than if the Public Works Director wants to say something with regards to my comments with wet ponds becoming, as I determined, marsh ponds over the years because of sediment and growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to the Director of Public Works. Any comments on the comments?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Staff are currently working with a consultant. We're undertaking a stormwater management facility needs and maintenance study. We're anticipating that study will be completed and ready for presentation to council in Q1 of 2023. This is going to lay out basically maintenance and operation requirements for these stormwater management ponds, which currently we don't have. And the councilor is correct. There is maintenance that is required on these ponds to basically remove sediment. And so that would impact the storage capabilities of those ponds. So a report will be coming back to council for consideration in 2023. That will identify best practices for maintenance and operation of these stormwater management ponds. And it will also address whether or not fencing is a best practice for stormwater management ponds, or using natural vegetation, when to use fencing. So that all ties into revising the engineering standards. I believe I said this before, when the engineering standards that are currently in place were brought to council in 2017 and approved by council. The stormwater management ponds in East Fawn Hill were predated council's adoption of those engineering standards. So long answer to that question, but yes, we will be revising our engineering standards. We are completing a study which we intend to bring to council in January of 2023, which is going to try to identify issues and come up with solutions to all these issues you're speaking of tonight.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hildebrand, any last comments?
Yeah, I'm going to have a hard time voting on which option we need to do. Obviously, we've got a fence around it now, which I think is good. I don't think that's a permanent solution, but for me to come up with allocating money to a future budget, I think is a good step. But what the future solution would be, I'm not absolutely sure, because we do have a lot of wet ponds that I don't think ever will be wet ponds. And to me, they're like, when in the lookout area, they're basically recreational areas. So I wouldn't want to fence those at this present time, to say the least. And this report seems to only deal with River Park, I think, River Estates. So I don't know where I go with my vote, to be honest with you, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Olson?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CAO or whoever he chooses. I'm thinking that the stormwater management ponds are probably going to stay as stormwater management ponds for the next several years, and probably next several decades, and not change very much except for the maintenance that we do on them. But I'm wondering if we shouldn't take the opportunity to create them as natural parks in the center of right in the center of the community. Imagine a community that has a park right in the center of it, then a green space, and much like what we have in downtown Font Hill with that with the Latham properties. I would wonder if we shouldn't have a report from staff on the possibilities of having those, our stormwater ponds, management ponds, in whatever state they're in, as refuges or reserves or some nationally recognized state of condition that maintains them the way they are, because even when they're dry, there's still homes for threatened species and loss of diversity. And I will take a natural solution to issues before I'll take an engineered solution any day. I will accept the idea that that there might be a danger there, and the snow fence matters and protects us for a period of time, but I would like to see the vegetation and perhaps some new vegetation that we introduce and non-invasive species that we introduce, see that take hold and become the natural vegetative dense barrier that we need there.
Okay, thank you,
So
Councillor.
that was to the CAO.
Yep, so Mr. CAO, want to comment on those comments?
Well, we have a time frame of, we're aiming for January, although it may possibly be February, depending on how the budget goes, where we'll provide the sort of engineering advice with respect to the potential future for the stormwater ponds. What Mr. Cook, Mr. Marr, and I haven't discussed yet is whether it'll be the sort of consultants doing a presentation or whether that'll be coming from staff. But I think it's entirely possible that regardless of that decision, we could do a companion report or a subcomponent of a staff report, if that's already coming, talking about environmental classification and potential policy changes, because really we're having, this is sort of two separate conversations. There's a technical engineering analysis that's necessary to guide future decision makings and to possibly change our engineering standards. There's also a policy question here. What do we envision for future stormwater ponds? What do we envision for our current stormwater ponds? Do they have a life cycle, and should they evolve into protected natural areas from what they currently are, et cetera? So I think all of Ms. Weens, Mr. Marr, Mr. Cook, and I are certainly hearing you. And I'm sure we'll touch on that, whether it's in one report or two. We'll work those details out in the months to come, but we'll be able to touch on those pieces. And like I say, there's both a policy consideration and a technical component to this. And frankly, we need more information before we can make improvements to either.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. CAO. Councillor Hahn.
Through the mayor, in the interim, I guess, the council question for Public Works, and that would be with regard to signage. Do we have permanent signage around our ponds, our storm management ponds? Kids are attracted to water at best of times, especially once it turns to ice for skating. So do we have signage around all the ponds, the kind that won't blow away, but rather, metal signs or what have you, that's very prominent to tell people to, stay away from the ponds or keep off the ice, those kinds of signage?
Mr. Director of Public Works, although I believe that the fire chief is is in the meeting, he could probably answer that. Yeah, there you are. Chief, can you answer those questions about signage?
Yes, there is signage. We put them up about 2 years ago, and it's no skating, no swimming, no playing. And there's a number of different symbols that illustrate don't do this in these ponds.
And that's like a permanent type sign, not the kind that has to be replaced every year. So it's like a metal sign or something like very prominent.
Yeah, they're very large steel signs on steel poles.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And thank you, Police Fire Chief. Councillor Corr.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director of Public Works. When walking through the subdivision, River Estate Parks, I noticed there's a lot of black fence already erected. Who put that up? And why wouldn't they have just added a couple more feet to partially block that pond we have there now?
Is that Public Works or perhaps Ms. Weens? Yes, Ms. Weens?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The black chain link fence is along the water course, and that was a requirement from the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority that the water course be fenced there because they do not want residences in their backyards back onto that water course, and they don't want the residences to encroach onto those water courses with their lawns and with their gardens. And so that's the reason why it was fenced. The water course has also been naturalized with plantings. And then as the Director of Public Works indicated, the stormwater management ponds were designed with a landscape plan around them that is to be also naturalized, that would prohibit people from accessing the ponds.
Councillor Corr?
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions, comments on this item? So then, Council, we have got to decide on an option for today, I believe. Options 1, 2, 4. Anyone wish to put forward their favorite option at this time? Councillor Wink?
So I'd like to put forward option 4. There is no additional costs attributed to it. The snow fence is going to remain there until the growth happens, and by then we'll have appropriate reports from staff and consultants to deal with this issue.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I personally will support that choice of options. Councillor Hildebrand, I see your hand.
Through you. I prefer option 4 to an extent. However, the wording there doesn't say we're waiting for a report before we remove the temporary fence. I'd like some wording or something to indicate that we're going to get the report both from the engineering and environmental part before we do remove that temporary fencing, unless it's understood by staff that that's what we mean by that, removing the temporary fencing. If I could have a comment on that.
Mr. CAO, please.
Subject to any discussion you have, I'm happy to take that as direction, and I can't imagine Mr. Marr and Mr. Cook have difficulty with that. They're hearing it in real time. They'll simply instruct their staff not to take it down until such time as you receive a report and make a policy decision.
Thank you.
Councillor Corr?
Yes, to you, Mr. Mayor. I fully agree with Councillor Wink and also with Councillor Hildebrand. I will be supporting option 4. It makes sense as long as that fence is not taken down, unless someone understands the importance that no one goes near that pond. That's all. So I will be supporting option number 4.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments on this option 4 that's being put forward? I guess, is there anyone who doesn't want to support option 4? Not seen any. Madame Deputy Clerk, I would think the decision is for option 4.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just be looking for a seconder for that motion.
Oh.
I do understand Councillor Wink.
Okay. Seconder is Councillor Olson.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, and I prepared the following amendment. That the motion be amended to insert option 4, being to allow the existing vegetation to mature and increase the naturalized buffer area before removing the temporary snow fence, and to strike options 1, 2, and 3. To Mr. Mayor for discussion on the amendment.
Okay, thank you. On the amendment, any discussion, questions? Not seen any. Madam Clerk?
Thank you for the vote. I will begin with Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Corr.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Counselor Stewart?
Yes.
Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to the main motion as amended, and for clarity, I will use the same mover and seconder from the amendment. I will read this into the record for clarity. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2022-0230 for information, and that Council directs staff to include option 4, being allow the existing vegetation to mature and increase the naturalized buffer area before removing the temporary snow fence, and to strike options 1, 2, and 3 as a capital budget project in 2023. To Mr. Mayor for discussion on the main motion as amended.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on the motion as amended? Not seeing any. Madam Deputy Clerk?
Thank you, and I will begin the vote with Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, that carries. Through Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to item 10.2.4, being urban hens. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Stewart. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2022-0220, Urban Hens for information, and that Council direct planning and bylaw staff to prepare a bylaw to permit, regulate, and license urban hens within the town of Pelham as per option 2 in this report. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you. Any councillor have questions, opinions on this item 10.2.4? Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. When I read the zoning bylaw, I think it clearly defines where the raising of poultry is permitted in zones, and that bylaw staff will continue to respond to complaints pursuant to the current regulations. Again, I consider this an extra bylaw and licensing unnecessary. And the individual resident concerned that has raised the issue numerous times, I have visited and talked to, and believe that option 1 satisfies that resident's concern. So on that basis, I will not be approving another bylaw to regulate hens. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, councillor. Any other comments? Again, we're Councillor Wink.
Sorry about that. Having a difficult time unmuting today. Sorry about that. I've had further complaints recently, not just with the one individual with respect to poultry. I've had complaints from other people in my ward about ducks being maintained in their neighbor's property, that there's, as a result of the ducks and the feed that's being given to the ducks, they're attracting mice and rats. I think the other problem is that the Ontario government's looked at density, and they're mandating higher density in all our areas. And the fact that these homes are very close together now, the ability to put up hen houses and the like, and the attraction of vermin is not a desirable thing to do. And I would like to make a suggestion that we introduce a bylaw that eliminates poultry in the urban areas. And obviously they're allowed on farms and whatever, but if we're trying to make bylaws for bylaw officers to ensure that the pens are correct and the hens are handled properly and whatever, we're creating a big mess for bylaw. And I appreciate the work that's gone into this report, but my preference would be that we, the other thing is is avian flu. Avian flu, there's been reports of that in the Niagara region this past week. So that avian flu can have some effects to individuals, and I think we're just opening up a can of worms if we're going to allow poultry, not just hens, but poultry in the urban area.
Okay, thank you for those comments, Councilor Wink. I see we have our policy planner with us. Any comments on this report, Lindsay?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, the current zoning bylaw and the newly adopted but under appeal bylaw do not prohibit any poultry in the urban area or in the rural area on lots that are under 0.4 of a hectare, or on agricultural lots that are under 2 hectares. So just to clarify that they are not currently permitted within the urban area.
Okay, so the bylaw that stands right now, if enforced, does indeed take poultry out of the urban area?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. One comment I would like to make is that when I first saw this in the come forward, I thought that it was a great idea. I know they have it in other urban centers, but when I see as Council Wink has stated, the density that's in our new subdivisions, it just won't work. And there's nowhere in Pelham that you can't drive 5 minutes and you could go to a roadside stand or to a farmer that has a sign out that says eggs at $5 a dozen. It's not like we live in the middle of Toronto and it takes an hour just to get outside of the paved area. So there really isn't an excuse, for lack of a better word, to have poultry inside the urban area. Especially if it's not looked after correctly, feed gets dispersed, the feed draws vermin, and it ends up being an endless cycle. So I would support the option that we do nothing, that already have the bylaw in place, and just we'll have to do a better job of enforcing it, I believe. Councillor Hahn, I believe you had your hand up.
Yes, through the mayor, just a query. So with regards to the 2 acres, so if we weren't to allow or to do nothing, which essentially then continues to not allow in urban settings, so in rural settings, then the lot size would have to be over 2 acres. Is that how I understand this? Can someone speak to that, the 2 acre, that number, and where that number comes from?
Would that be Director of Planning, Ms. Weens?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll allow Lindsay to respond to that. She's the one who's been working on this, as well as the zoning bylaw.
Okay, thank you. Lindsay, back to you.
Thank you. Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. That is correct. So currently, or the current zoning bylaw permits agricultural uses in the agricultural zone on properties that are more than 2 hectares. And it does not permit agricultural uses on rural properties that are under 0.4 of a hectare. So those properties that are smaller, that are in the agricultural area, or the agricultural zone, or the rural zone, would not be permitted to have chickens.
So further to that then, so in a rural area, if somebody has an acre and a half, something like that, 1 3/4 acres, I would probably have no issue with them having a chicken coop and having chickens, because there's enough space between them and their neighbor, and they're in the rural area. So I don't know if it needs to be at 2 acres in order to be able to have chickens. I mean, that seems like an awful lot of space just to have some chickens. And of course, you no doubt could look at having a capping at a certain number, so it's not, an absurd number of chickens, but we cap it at a certain number of 5, 10, whatever it is. But to have 2 acres in order to do that seems extreme.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Councillor Stewart?
Yes, thank you to you, Mr. Mayor. I'm more likely to go along with option 2. Not every urban property is as small as the, the townhouse size lots in the new development. In the, the older parts of town, the lots are much larger. So I'm thinking if you have to have a certain amount of square feet per bird, a maximum of birds somewhere between 6 and 10 birds. So you would have to accommodate those in whatever square footage. And then there would also need to be setbacks from neighbors' properties. So as long as your birds would fit in that area and not, be up to the fence line as we're having issues with that one property, I don't see why it couldn't be accommodated. Obviously, if a lot is very small, they would not be there. But on a lot of the larger lots, it would be possible to have, somewhere 6, 8, 10 birds. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Wink?
So the recent complaints that I've had in my ward are on larger lots. And as I said before, the ducks are attracting vermin, particularly rats. And I hate like heck to see us start to have a rat problem in our community. And the more we can keep them away, the better it is. And if poultry attracts rats, then let's keep them out of the urban area.
Okay, thank you for those comments, Councillor Wink. Any IEC, Councillor Hahn?
Through the mayor. So back to what I mentioned earlier, is there any councillor that wants to speak to or have an opinion on why it would need to be 2 acres in order to have in the rural section? Does that not seem kind of that's a significant amount of property in a rural setting to enable somebody to have some birds? So why wouldn't we bring that down to at least an acre? Half acre. I mean, you think of the distance between you and your neighbor in your rural area. Why couldn't somebody have a chicken coop and they're living on just 1 acre?
Councillor Hahn, I must admit I agree with you on that. That out in the rural area, someone lives on an acre that's being subdivided off a bigger property. I must say I agree totally with you that chances are the nearest neighbor 300 or 400 yards away, and what difference, what harm could it be on that 1 acre lot to have some chickens? I agree with you on that for sure. Any other comment from any other councillors on our chicken debate? Councillor Hildebrand.
Yeah, on the chicken debate, I agree with you with the size of the lot. A lot of those 1 acre lots are subdivided when the farmer retired and developed a home for himself, and the son or someone else took over the rest of the farm. So there is a lot of property around those rural areas. And yeah, I'm sure that doesn't, but I'm wondering whether there's any flexibility in the bylaw area, that they're just not going to arbitrarily go and rule on these lots. There's going to be common sense applied, even if we do keep the bylaw the way it is.
Thank you for that. Mr. CAO, any comments?
Well, it seems like council might be coalescing around something here. Perhaps we could pose the question to Ms. Richardson, who did a lot of research in coming up with this work. She's consulted a lot of bylaws in other municipalities. I don't know where the 2 number came from. It may well be a practice from elsewhere. It may have been chosen randomly, but that might help council land on something, and perhaps Ms. Richardson might know or recall the smallest lot size she saw relative to, say, allowing chickens in either hamlets or in semi-rural or the like.
Okay, Ms. Richardson, back to you.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Those numbers actually come from our bylaw. And so our zoning bylaw, the way that it's written, we don't sort of permit that use unless, so for the agricultural zone, you have to, in order to permit the agricultural use, which could be the keeping of chickens, you have to qualify for having what we classify as a hobby farm, and you have to have that 2 hectares in order to do that. So any agricultural property that's under that 2 hectares doesn't qualify as a hobby farm, and therefore the use is just prohibited. In terms of the rule, it's a similar situation. So those numbers come straight from our bylaw. In terms of the other sort of municipalities that I looked at, the majority of them were more urban in what they are. I mean, you're looking at Toronto and Niagara Falls, places like that. The ones that were sort of similar to us were more like the Township of Norfolk, the Township of Georgina, and those municipalities had actually very similar provisions because their bylaws have similar provisions for agricultural and rural uses. So that's where those numbers came from. It wasn't something that we really looked into because a lot of municipalities regulate the use through setback requirements, not necessarily through lot size requirements. So essentially, when you're looking at in the urban area, if a lot doesn't fit or you can't fit that use on the lot, then it's not permitted. So, some of these really smaller lots probably wouldn't qualify. But some of the larger lots in the urban area, you could potentially, get the use on and meet those setback requirements. So that's sort of where we came up with some of those numbers. But certainly, I mean, something we could maybe consider through the zoning bylaw is rather than dealing with the urban area stuff, we could look at permitting them and licensing them on those agricultural or rural properties that don't qualify for the keeping of chickens as of right. Basically, that's an option as well.
Okay, thank you. Just to clarify my own stand, I still don't want to see any chickens in the urban area, but it's only in the agricultural area where the homes are definitely farther apart that maybe we should revisit that number. I see Director of Planning, Ms. Weens.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, as Ms. Richardson indicated, we created a kind of a classification for a hobby farm, which previously did not exist in our zoning bylaw. And so that's where, that size comes from, and it could be the keeping of chickens, it could be 1 or 2 horses, and those kind of things. So if council is looking at allowing hens on rural properties that wouldn't qualify as a hobby farm but are the 1 acre size property, then we would be looking at a motion to that effect, or an amendment to this motion to direct us to go back and present a bylaw licensing requirements for just the rural areas that are not hobby farms.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Hahn?
Thank you. So I would propose that. I think that seems appropriate. If you're in the country and to not be able to have a horse or to have another an animal of some sort, and you're on an acre or an acre and a half of property, it seems a little extreme that we wouldn't allow that. And if that's the case, then I think that this should be something we should look at maybe in the future and have a report on.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me, Councillor Hahn, are you putting that forward as a motion?
Please.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder for this motion? Councillor Hildebrand? You'll second? Thank you. Madame Deputy Clerk, how are you keeping up with us?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to clarify with the Director of Planning, that would, this amendment would be in addition to option 2?
Ms. Weens?
Mr. Mayor, through you, what I understand from council is that it would be instead of option 2.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, I've prepared the following amendment. That the motion be amended to strike the second paragraph and insert that the motion be amended to direct staff to prepare a bylaw for the rural area and that are not classified as hobby farms.
Oh, yes. Any discussion on this? Councillor Wink?
So just for clarification, because Councillor Hahn was saying hobby farm and don't see any reason why you couldn't have a horse on an acre. We're not talking about changing the definition of a hobby farm. I would say that what we're trying to do is make an exception to allow hens on 1 acre properties and not any other type of livestock.
Councillor Hahn, is that the spirit of your motion?
I think it's all poultry, so it'd be ducks and hens and the like, would it not be?
Back to go to the Director of Planning, please.
Mr. Mayor, through you, certainly based on the research that we have done, it is hens that is preferable. From speaking with people in public health and from speaking with people in other jurisdictions, ducks and other types of poultry can be problematic. Generally the restriction is to hens for, just the keeping of hens in a small chicken coop and being able to get eggs for your own personal use. Those that are larger farming operations that can house ducks and other chickens or other types of fowl, geese and whatnot, there are different requirements for those types of fowl than for hens. And so, just to be clear, what we were always only talking about were hens. And so that's what we would be looking for clarification from council on.
I'll go back to Councillor Hahn first.
Yes, so that's fine. If we want to stick with hens, then hens it is in a rural setting then. And we just need to put a parameter around the size, and I think it would seem appropriate to perhaps have staff come back with a report on what that size would be, whether it's an acre or 3/4 an acre or what have you. Okay,
thank you. I see Councillor Wink.
So just to be clear, we're talking about chicken hens because a female duck is a hen. A female ostrich is a hen. If you look at the definition of a female fowl, most of them are called hens. So we've got to clarify that we're talking about chickens.
Okay, thank you,
Female
Councillor Wink.
chicken.
And that's why you got A in biology. Thank you. Let's go back to Director of Planning.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you. Certainly when we come back with the bylaw, it will be that specific because yes, we do not want any type of confusion in what we are talking about, have only been talking about are chicken hens.
Thank you for that. Councillor Stewart, I believe I saw your hand.
Yes, you did. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I have no issue at all with what Councillor Hahn suggested. I'm in complete agreement with her, but I don't believe that should be taking the place of option 2, because what she's discussing is hens in a rural setting outside the urban boundary. And what the intent of this whole discussion was about the urban hens. So, I'm very happy with Councillor Hahn's idea, but that should be a separate issue to this. And it should not replace option 2 in this, because she's talking about rural and this is about urban. And again, I suggest that option 2 is the right option, provided it's placed properly. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wink?
Yes, so at the beginning of the discussions, there was a number of councillors that said option 1, to do nothing, because that would eliminate the need for a licensing regime, but also flat out say, no, you can't have poultry in the urban areas. So maybe as a suggestion, we vote on, I'll make a motion to, as far as this report, is option 1 to do nothing, which eliminates poultry. And then we can look at something further for the rural portion, or for the rural areas.
Yes, I can imagine that we'd probably have an amendment to that motion. I would turn to the deputy clerk. Is that how you see this unraveling?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. We did have a mover and seconder, so I turn to Councillor Hahn if she would be opening to hearing option 1 as an amendment,
Councillor Hahn?
or shall we move forward?
Yeah, that's fine.
That's fine, okay.
Okay, and seconded, Councillor Hildebrand, would you be also willing to drop that motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So then, Councillor Wink, do you want to put forward a motion?
So the motion would be to adopt option 1 for the urban area. And then that staff would bring a report back to us with recommendations regarding the rural area.
Okay, aye.
And I'll second that motion.
Okay. Councillor Hahn, will that capture what you're after, or do you want to put, I thought you might want to put an amendment to that motion with your idea in it, but maybe you're okay with the staff report coming back. It's up to you.
No, I'm fine. I'm not looking for credit here. I think that I'm fine with doing option 1, and then if you want to do it separately together, it doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, I'm looking for option 1 for urban, and then have a report come back with regards to rural, and that can be in the future.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Councillor Stewart?
Yes, thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to divide the motion, so they're voted on separately, which option for urban, and then the option for rural. Thank you.
Madam Clerk?
Yes, thank you. I do believe that the amendment did cover both, if I'm understanding correctly. Maybe I'll just reread the amendment into the record for clarity. That the motion be amended to strike option 2 and insert option 1 being do nothing, and that staff report back with recommendations regarding chicken hens in the rural area.
Councillor Stewart?
I'm not happy with that. Okay. I would like Councillor Hahn's rural motion to be separate from this entire discussion, because this discussion is about urban hens. Yeah. So I would like to dispense with the discussion of the urban hens and then move on to the discussion of the rural hens. I would like them separate. Thank you.
Okay, so just to be clear, and Madam Deputy Clerk, please correct me if I'm wrong. So Councillor, what we're looking at now is we go to option 1, which is no urban hens, chicken hens, and then the staff at that time would also bring back a report detailing the correct or the proposed acreage that would be needed for having chicken hens in the rural area. But how else would you suggest we do that?
Mr. Cribbs?
Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. Go ahead, Mr. CAO.
Your Worship, I think Councillor Stewart was barking up the right tree. The bone of contention is whether or not you're going to permit hens in the urban area. So if you do split that, they are separate topics. The first question will or won't pass, and then the second one can pass or be defeated and stand on their own. Conceptually, they can stand on their own. So I think Councillor Stewart had a good way forward, and I think her motion to split.
So then, Madam Deputy Clerk, appears that we will vote separately on the motion.
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, the first amendment would be that the motion be amended to strike option 2 and insert option 1 being do nothing.
Yes.
And sorry, for clarity, would it, the mover be Councillor Wink and seconder Councillor Kaur?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. To Mr. Mayor for discussion on that amendment.
Okay, any further discussion on this amendment? Not seeing any, we'll call the, get the clerk to call the vote.
Okay, and for the vote, I will begin with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
No.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
And Mayor Duncan.
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. And I do believe the second amendment to the main motion would be that staff report back with recommendations regarding chicken hens in the rural area. Chief Mr. Mayor, I'd be looking for a mover and a seconder.
Okay, do you need a mover and a seconder on this motion? I see Councillor Hahn will move it.
Thank
Do
you.
we have a seconder? Councillor Kaur.
Thank you, and to Mr. Mayor for a discussion on the second amendment.
Okay, and is there any further discussion on the second amendment? Not seeing any, Madam Deputy Clerk?
Thank you for the vote. I will begin with Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
And Mayor Duncan.
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. That does bring us to the main motion as amended, and I will read that into the record for clarity. Just provide me one moment. Be it resolved that Council receive report 2022-0220 Urban Hens for information, and that Council direct planning and bylaw staff to proceed with option number 1 being do nothing, and that staff report back with recommendations regarding chicken hens in the rural area. To Mr. Mayor for discussion on the main motion as amended.
Okay, thank you. Any, again, any further discussion? Not seeing any, Madam Deputy Clerk?
Thank you for the vote. I will begin with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
No.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Mayor Duncan.
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that
So
does
are we
bring...
finished with the hands?
That's
We are
correct.
finished with the hands.
Okay. I just want to say the closest I ever get to a hand, they're already dead.
There you go.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to item 10.2.5, being a recommendation report for zoning bylaw amendment 147 Port Robinson Road, 2022-0217. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that Council receive report 2022-0217 for information as it pertains to file number AM-04-2022, and that Council approve the bylaw to amend the zoning from agricultural A zone to a site-specific residential 2-286 zone, and that the residential development holding RDH zone. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you. Any discussion on 10.2.5, Council? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk, Deputy Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the vote, I will begin with Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Duncan.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. Mr. Mayor, that brings us to item 10.2.6, Natural Infrastructure Fund Application. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that Council receive report 2022-0235, Corporate Services, Natural Infrastructure Fund Application for information, and that Council directs the grant application for $1 million be submitted for the East Font Hill Natural Park Development, and that Council direct the town's contribution towards this park is $300,000, which shall form a portion of the 2023 capital budget request. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions on this item 10.2.6? Councillor Stewart.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I imagine this question would go to Ms. Quinlan Murphy. It's a lot of money, and I'm wondering if council would be able to red circle the town's portion of the $300,000 depending on whether or not we receive the grant.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we normally do red circle grant funded projects, so we would do it for this one. But just to let council know that prior to this grant application, we had $500,000 in our capital budget for 2024 for this park. So what we did when we saw this grant application, the grant application, the maximum amount is $1 million and the town has to contribute 20%. So with that, and with the size of the park and the work that's involved, we wanted to take advantage of the grant funding if we are fortunate to get that money to really make it a nice natural park, to have like a natural playground, beautiful pavilion, and it really will enhance the East Fawn Hill area with the natural features. So if we don't get this grant money, it's going to be $500,000 that the town will be contributing to developing this park. This is what we've always had planned for this park. So hopefully we get the grant and we can do a much larger project, and the town's contribution will decrease from $500,000 to $300,000, and we can get a $1.3 million park development, natural park.
Councillor Stewart?
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other questions, comments? Certainly, Ms. Quinlan Murphy, you've pulled the rabbit out of the hat many times for this council and for the residents, and we'll look forward to you one more trick for the town.
Not up to me, but it's a very exciting project, and we really hope that we will get this money, because it would really be a game changer for that area, that we can do all these to convert that land into a natural park, which is what it was originally before it became farmland. So it'd be a very exciting project for the town.
Oh, yeah, that's for sure. And again, thank you for us researching these grants. The council and the residents appreciate it, that's for sure. Any other comments or questions? Not seeing any. Madam Deputy Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the vote, I will begin with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. Mr. Mayor, that brings us to item 10.2.7, ward boundary and council composition update and selection process for deputy mayor. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that council receive report 2022-0224, ward boundary and council composition update and selection process for deputy mayor for information, and that council authorize and direct staff to investigate the cost of a ward boundary and council composition report from Watson and Associates for council's consideration within the 2023 budget process, and that council directs staff to include a report for the new council's consideration at their inaugural meeting for determination of the process to appointing a deputy mayor at the December 5th, 2022 council meeting. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments on this report? I see Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe this comment will be directed to the CAO. I believe the study should take into account the density of each ward. In 2018, when I went around twice to my residence, I visited approximately 2,000 homes each time. Meanwhile, my other competitors in Ward 1 and 2, not really competitors, but other councillors that were running in those wards, spent equivalent number of hours going to their residents, mainly because they don't have the same number of residents. You got fewer visits in per the time spent because of the distance they had to travel. because their distances are so huge. So if you just go by density, I had a far easier time visiting a lot of residents versus, say, Councillor Wink or Councillor Stewart or Councillor Olson, because of the distance they had to travel. And I'm not sure how Watson and Associates take that into effect. Because, like I said, the hours you spend are the same, just the number of residents you visit are different. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. CAO, any comments?
Councillor Hildebrand makes a very good point. That is one of the many factors that is considered when a ward boundary review is conducted. I'm sure Madam Clerk can name most of them, as can I, but population size, population density, population location, natural geographic features, historical communities, communities of interest. There's a laundry list of analysis, and that will be conducted by, in this case, Watson and Associates. So that is a key starting point is population.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn to Madame Clerk. Any other comments? Ms. Wilfred?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, I do agree with the CAO. That's certainly something that the report will look at, along with other factors.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Olson?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CAO. One of the things that I would be looking for is creating interest in the community to run for council, run for elected office, and I'm thinking in particular of people that would not normally come forward or put their names forward to be on council. I'd also be looking for some sort of continuity of the communities. I certainly wouldn't. I think it benefits everybody if they have a portion of rural and urban in their within their wards. I think there's an elegance to the two people per ward, because if someone is ill or can't be there, you always have a representative. I wouldn't want to look at a one person per ward type of a thing, because that could leave somebody unrepresented for a period of time. And I also look at your comments with respect to the corporate perspective of having a deputy mayor move up to the position of mayor as a form of succession planning. I wouldn't be in favor of that, because that would look to the public like our next mayor is pre-planned, and this is where we're going, the direction we're going to go. There might be a way to create a more activist type of deputy mayor, but I'm very satisfied with the system the way it has. It seems to have a fairness built into it, because choosing the mayor for 8 months or the deputy mayor for 8 months by way of alphabet, that seems to be a fair way of doing things. But I certainly wouldn't want to look at the deputy mayor position as a permanent one, and meaning that person moves into the mayoral seat automatically. That would not be something I'd be looking for. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Stewart?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm in agreement with Councillor Olson about rotating the deputy mayor. It's a good way for each councillor to get an idea of, how it works from the top seat, and it could help inform them of whether or not the next time around that they do want to run for mayor. And my other comment on this is I would not be in favor at all of running an at-large election. We have such a huge split between urban and rural, and I would be afraid that if it was at large, the rural population would largely be left out of representation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. My thoughts exactly on the at-large proposition that if you could end up theoretically with all your representation in the urban area, and the rural area would be neglected. So 100% with you on those thoughts. Any other questions or comments? Okay, not seeing any. It would be, if I can just muse for a couple of minutes, 30 seconds. I know the region, way back in May or June, they were trying to get more people, minority groups, whether it be women, people of color, they were trying to get them to put their name forward and take part in this election. It would be interesting to know how successful, if it was successful at all, that program was. And if it wasn't successful, it'd be interesting to know what they could do to improve it the next time around. Obviously, with the number of acclamations that we saw throughout the region, I could hardly think it was successful, although there's so many other things that go into it. People coming off of COVID, different lifestyles now after that. So it's hard to say how many factors factored into this election. But I do. It would be interesting to know, just looking at all the candidates, did we indeed get more women running? Did we indeed get more people of color in the region putting their name forward? I know that the push was there. I just don't know how successful that was. Anyway, back to you, Madam Deputy Clerk.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. That program. Yes. Thank you. That program was called Seat at the Table. I do have the contact at the region, so I can endeavor to ask them if they have any statistics or if they felt the program was successful, and I can get back to council.
Oh, great. Thank you for that. Thanks. To you, Madam Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If there's no more discussion, I will begin the vote with Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. Mr. Mayor, that brings us to item 10.2.8, Flag Policy Update. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2022-0175, Flag Policy Update for information, and that Council approve Policy Number S203-14, Flag Policy as revised. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion, questions on 10.2, well, no, it's 10.2.8, the Flag Policy Update? Not seeing any. Madam Deputy Clerk.
Thank you for the vote. I will begin with Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. Mr. Mayor, that brings us to item 10.2.9, Council Photographs Policy Update. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Kaur, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2022-0161, Council Photograph Policy Update for information, and that Council approve Policy Number S201-05, Council Photographs as revised. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk. Any questions or comments? I know that Councillor Olson has expressed was wondering if photoshopping would be allowed in any of the camera shots at the next council, but that'll have to be determined by the next council, perhaps. Other than that, any other comments or questions? Not seeing any. Back to the Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the vote, I'll begin with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Counselor Wink,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to the presentation and consideration of the bylaws. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Stewart. Be it resolved that Council of the Town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following bylaws, do now read a first, second, and third time and do pass same, and that the mayor and clerk be and are hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaws. Bylaw number 14489-2022, being a bylaw to adopt an emergency management program and emergency management plan governing the provision of necessary services during an emergency, and to reestablish an emergency management program committee for the town of Pelham and appoint members thereto, and to reestablish an emergency control group for the town of Pelham and appoint members thereto, and to repeal and replace bylaw numbers 2649-2005, 3334-2013, 4142-2019, 4179-2019, and 4338-2021. Bylaw number 2 being bylaw number 4490-2022, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 1136-1987 as amended for lands located at 147 Port Robinson Road, located on the north side of Port Robinson Road, lying west of Moody Street, and legally known as part of Lot 166, formerly part of Thorold Township, now Pelham, being parts 1 to 4 on Plan 59R 2675, from an agricultural A zone to a site-specific residential 2286 zone and the residential development holding RDH zone. Bylaw number 3 being bylaw 4491-2022, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 1136-1987 as amended for lands located on the west side of Norgate Way, north of Summersides Boulevard and east of Station Street, legally described as part of lots 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 11, registered plan 717, and part of lots 166 and 167 in the town of Pelham, regional municipality of Niagara, from an agricultural A zone to a site-specific 2324 zone, and a residential multiple 1325, RM1325 zones. Bylaw 4 being bylaw 4492-2022, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 1136-1987 as amended for lands at the end of Tanner Drive being described legally as part of Township Lot 177 on 59R 15420, parts 7 and 8, parts 9 on Plan 59R 15743, part 2 from the residential 1 holding zone to the site residential 2326 zone, residential multiple 1327, and open space 328 zones, Tanner Extension File AM-12-2021. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk. On these bylaws, any questions or comments? Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Hahn.
So the mayor, with regards to the emergency management program, so the report that was done by the consultant, was that made available to the public?
Mr. CAO, perhaps?
Well, it's a publicly available document.
Oh, the report that the council, that they did for the town of Pelham is in fact posted? Oh, okay, I wasn't sure if it was, thank you. I understood the emergency management program itself would be, but the report that was done that evaluated our emergency program, I didn't know that was posted, but you're saying it is, okay.
No, I'm just saying it's a publicly available document.
What does that mean? So it's posted, or how is somebody to see that then?
If anyone wishes it, we provide them copies.
Councillor Hahn?
Okay, I don't know why, if it was never put in the minutes, it was never part of the correspondence for someone to, because didn't we spend quite a bit of money on that?
Upwards of $20,000, as I recall.
Yeah, so I just would have expected that to be part of the correspondence so folks could know how we spent that money. Is that something we can do?
Well, it's, yes.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions on any of the bylaws? Not seeing any. Deputy Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If there's no further discussion, I will begin the vote with Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Counselor Olson,
Yes.
Counselor Stewart,
Yes.
Counselor Wink,
Yes.
Counselor Hahn,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to item 14, being a notice of motion, and I understand that Counselor Stewart has a motion to introduce.
Counselor Stewart?
Yes, thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. This is regarding the street crossing in front of Wellington Heights School. I know this has been discussed at council meetings in the past. It's not marked very well. There are markings, but they, when they're refreshed, they tend to fade very quickly. And I think part of the problem at that crossing is that the school itself is not visible because it's set back and the street access is through Cherry Ridge subdivision. So a lot of people are not really aware that it's a designated crossing for school children. And I'm putting this forward so that it gets included in the budget deliberations for the next council. It needs, better painting at the very least, probably comparable to what they have put in front of Glen Green School, because that's very noticeable. I have forwarded some pictures to Public Works of some lights that I saw in Dunville that they installed for the street crossing to their farmers market. And they are solar powered. They have a push button which activates the flashing lights for safe crossing. And there's also an audible signal so that you know it's safe to cross. Yeah. I think that's a good option to look at. When I emailed our Public Works, I think if I recall correctly, Mr. Mars said something like that would be in the neighborhood of about $25,000. And I think that would be pretty much a bargain when it concerns the safety of our children crossing the street. So I would like to put a motion forward so that we can upgrade that crossing for the children. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And as a notice of motion, that's all we have to do tonight.
That's correct. The
Yes.
formal motion will follow on the next council agenda.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to item 17, resolution to move in camera. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Kaur, seconded by Councillor Wink. Be it resolved that the next portion of the meeting be closed to the public in order to consider a matter under Section 239(2) of the Municipal Act as follows. E, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before an administrative tribunals affecting the municipality. And F, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, procurement. To Mr. Mayor for discussion.
Okay, any discussion on this motion to move in camera? Not seeing any. Madam Deputy Clerk?
Thank you for the vote. I will begin with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. Mr. Mayor, if you would just allow me a moment to stop the recording and the live stream.
Of course.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can confirm that the live stream and recording has begun. I thereby have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that Council adjourn the in-camera session and that Council do now rise with report. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you. Any discussion on this motion? Not seeing any. Madam Deputy Clerk?
Thank you for the vote. I will begin with Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you. That carries. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that the Chief Administrative Officer and Town Solicitor be and are hereby authorized to undertake the directions provided during the in-camera meeting of October 3rd, 2022. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, any further discussion on this motion? Not seeing any?
Thank you. For the vote, I will begin with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to the confirming bylaw. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time and passed, being a bylaw number 4493-2022, to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of council of the town of Pelham at its regular meeting held on the 3rd day of October 2022. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any?
Thank you. For the vote, I will begin with Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you. That carries. Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to adjournment. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that this regular meeting of council be adjourned until the next regular meeting scheduled for October 17th, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Any discussion on this last motion? Not seeing any?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the vote, I will begin with Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is 8:07 p.m. and you may gavel at your meeting.
Meeting's adjourned.